And long story short, we basically decided to do it on our own at first. And so I spent about 3 months trying to apply all your principles. And I got super scared. And I just said, you know what? I cannot afford to make a life-changing mistake. I could set my family back financially by a decade. And so I'm going to go the mentorship route. And we began to explore mentorship.
Burnie, welcome to the show today.
Awesome. Good to be here. Thank you, Michael.
So I think you're the first pastor I've had on the show ever. Certainly one that's essentially financially free. We talked about this because we saw each other at Dealmaker Bootcamp a few weeks ago, and I grilled you on this a little bit, and you're like, "Wait, Michael, I don't have no intention of quitting my job." And of course, I was like, "What are you talking about? Of course you do." So first of all, explain to us why you embarked on this real estate journey. Like, what's the problem that you were having, right? And you're like, oh, I know, I could solve this real estate. Like, why did you get into real estate? What's behind that?
Great question. I've discovered this as you have, that everyone pretty much has a problem that gets into real estate. And my problem was money, of course. But to give a little bit of backstory on that, basically my wife and I, we had been on staff at our church for, let's see, about 5 or 6 years, and just kind of grown in our faith and in our spiritual development. And we've been giving very heavily through our church to the cause of missions. And I just throw it out there just so everybody knows what we're talking about. You know, clarity is more important. We're giving about 30% of our income to the cause of Christ through tithes and offerings and missions giving and things like that. And so we really enjoyed that. That may not be a lot for some people, but for us, it was a lot. We were living in Southern California, had a mortgage, had 3 kids under the age of well, now I have a 7, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Me and my wife have those kids. And so young family and full-time job. And we basically said, we've got to take care of our future. We either have to stop giving as much, or we need to find some way to increase our income. And so we opted for the income route, and it seems to have worked out.
All right. So how did you go about this thing, right? Because you said you have a full-time job, you're a pastor, you have demands on time like most people working a full-time job, really. And how did you get yourself into real estate? Because, 100% of people do this on the side. Everybody says, oh, I don't have the time for it. How did you find the time, or how did you actually get the process of getting into real estate? What was your initial plan, and maybe how did it change?
My initial plan was to follow some friends of ours into single family rentals.
Sure.
And we actually did that. So in 2019, we had 4 single family homes in Augusta, Georgia. And it was a little different from the path our friends had followed, but we went that direction. It seemed to be working great. But then we ran the numbers and we realized that, okay, now we've used up all our capital. It's a saving game. So we wait and save, then buy again, then wait and save. And over time, your timeline gets less. And we said, that's too slow. That's not what we want to do. And about that time, I had become an addict kind of for Bigger Pockets. And I heard your podcast on Bigger Pockets, and I was hooked. And so this is actually kind of a dream of mine that I didn't even know I had, to be on your podcast. It's pretty awesome. And I probably listened to 30 or 40 episodes. And long story short, we basically decided to do it on our own at first. And so I spent about 3 months trying to apply all your principles, and I got super scared. And I just said, you know what? I cannot afford to make a life-changing mistake. I could set my family back financially by a decade. And so I'm going to go the mentorship route. And we began to explore mentorship, and ended up doing that with you.
And I was the same way. The only difference between you and I is I actually did stuff that set me a decade back, and I didn't go to the mentorship route back when I got in the restaurant business. Man, a mentor back then would have really helped. And you're like, oh man, I'm into this for a few weeks. This is, I don't want to make the big mistakes. I need a little bit of help. And you chose to work with with us as an organization, but also specifically with someone who's a full-time syndicator. They've already quit their job. They have hundreds of units. And so what value did you find now in hindsight with a mentor? So it was a good idea at the time, but now that you've gone through it and you've done a few deals, how important was that?
It was super important. To be honest, I really couldn't have done it without you and your team, Michael. And I've said it to you personally, but I guess publicly, just like to say thank you for investing in the masses at large, like us, because you could just go out and do your thing. and you don't have to provide this mentorship and these programs to help folks. But me and my family benefited immensely, and we appreciate it. Back to your question, if I remember it right, like what was the value of the mentorship?
Yes. What specifically helped? So I appreciate the kind words, but what specifically helped get you into your first deal and then possibly do another about working with someone who's basically done this a few times?
Sure, I would say the two major aspects of getting into my first deal, which you say is vitally important, and it is, were one, it gave me confidence, confidence that I did not have going into it. I'm a pastor. I felt like I was doing what God wanted me to do, even in this real estate venture. But it was hard because I have no background in that. I didn't know about real estate at all until I was 40 years old. And so, really, being with a mentor like Drew Whitson just gave me immense confidence that I could go out there and kill it. And if I messed up, someone would be there to at least catch me or pick me up and dust me off. And the second aspect was honestly having access to the people and organizations that make things happen in this industry, attorneys and CPAs, and just all the different pieces of your team that you have to assemble. It would have been a hard grind without Drew kind of paving the way, saying, hey, here's who I use, here's who I recommend, here's a couple options. And it really just kind of shortcutted the whole process.
So confidence and the access to an existing network, those are absolutely critical. So tell us a little bit about your first deal. Was that a pretty simple deal to do, or what did you have some twists and turns on the path there?
Looking back, it's a very simple and a very small deal, but that's the way it always is, right? But at the time, it was massive. It's a 29 unit apartment complex. You're very familiar with it based on our conference a couple of weeks ago. And there were some twists and turns. There always are. This one had a single family home attached to it. And so we were really trying to do a few different things with that. We were trying to carve it out at the beginning. There were some wires that got crossed with our lender. They didn't understand that, and we were in danger of not closing in the last couple of weeks. There were some major capex that the previous seller had to do that we thought would be a deal killer. We had 5 total amendments on that contract, and so it was
I mean,
a journey.
definitely a lot to navigate without someone looking over your shoulder, I can imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bernie, so in the beginning, I mean, how are you able to land deals when you're just getting started? Like what are your methods and how are you finding success?
It's all about relationships, and I hate to beat the drum and be cliche, but it really is. It is just about developing relationships with different people and going through all those doors, not despising any relationship. I think back to one time I was working in a financial institution, and it was commission based. And when the individual was talking about a third party, basically found out that they were not someone who was going to give them business. They kind of were very rude to them and said, you know what, not worth my time, and so forth. And that is not the attitude that you can have in any business, but especially not in multifamily, because you never know what's going to come back around. You never know who's going to come back around. And so I would say that the answer is really developing good relationships. And our first deal, actually, we got from our property manager. So our property manager for our 4 single family homes, if I can back the train up just a second. Sorry, I'm a pastor. I like to talk. Basically, we had these 4 single family homes, and our property manager recognized that we were getting into multifamily. And so they were going to manage this 29 unit apartment complex, and it fell out of contract. The day it fell out of contract, he calls me up, said, hey, Bernie, I know you're looking for multifamily. Would you be interested? I said, send me the financials. He sent them over. And that night I did the underwriting, and I said, this looks like a great deal. And 3 days later, we had it under contract. And so, brokers, yes, I have a relationship with brokers. I totally agree with that route, but this one happened to come to me through property manager relationships.
It's not the first time I've heard that. I remember Ed Hermson I had on the podcast a while back. He got his first deal through property management. Also, as you're building your team, right, you come across the attorneys, the CPAs, your property managers, and sometimes you have access to a deal. And I love that. Now think about, you talk about confidence, and I don't want to gloss over this thing, because here you are, you're a pastor. People know you as a pastor, right? You're
Yeah.
you're not the you're not the kind of how much was the deal? What was the purchase price?
1.4 million.
Yeah, they don't know you as someone who's capable of buying a $1.4 million anything.
Nope.
So what gave you the confidence to actually even attempt this? Okay. I mean, I know you had a single family house, but most people can sort of wrap their head around the, and you're like, I know, I'm going to go get a mentor and buy a 29 plus unit apartment building. Like, what hurdles did you have to overcome in your mind to kind of take action? Because a lot of people are paralyzed, or they're like, they can't
Sure.
believe they can do it. And so if I can't believe I can do something, as you know, man of faith, if I don't believe something, why am I going to do something? Because I have no confidence it's gonna happen anyway. So what kind of gave you the confidence to basically move forward, even though you didn't have all the answers?
I would say having support in your life is huge. And I guess this would be where I give my wife some great props here. My wife, Leslie, we've been married now for, oh boy, 12 years, almost 13. And she was with me the whole step of the way. We were on board 100%. We did the single family homes kind of as a team. But then when we launched into multifamily, just out of necessity and our young kids, I kind of had to take the lead on that. But she has been my avid supporter and backer, and she just wrote me a note a couple of weeks ago, and I was just really touched. And she doesn't even know I was going to say this, but basically she said that you jumped into this business not knowing which way was up, and you're killing it. And I don't know how to explain to you what that does to me as a man, just saying, hey, my wife believes in me, and that was really awesome. And I have a business mentor, and my boss, my pastor, my senior pastor. He believed in me, and he's my greatest champion for capital raising, let me tell you. And so just having those people in my life gave me immense confidence to move forward and take the risk. And then ultimately, I did feel that I was doing what God wanted me to do. And that's, this path may not be the same path for every person or every pastor, obviously not. But I felt that I was doing exactly what God wanted me to do, and it gave me great confidence.
Yeah. Man, that's amazing, Bernie. So, um, who would you say, I'm sorry, what role would you say that uh, does your faith play as an entrepreneur?
Um, I think that my faith plays an immense role in that. Um, there's a funny thing. I think people think sometimes that you divide your life into different buckets, and you have a family bucket, and you have a religious bucket, and you have a business bucket, and so forth. And my life is, I would say, is completely integrated, and I believe that that is the way it is supposed to be. If you look into the Bible, the Word of God, I think totally. I can't be one face to one person and another face to another. And so my faith, my belief in God completely colors every aspect of what I do in a good way. It means that I believe that I have a moral imperative to be ethical in my dealings. It means that I believe kindness is more important than the next dollar. It means that even if something hurts me, if I say it or I give my word, then I'm going to go ahead and keep that. It means that my reasons for doing what I do are not ultimately rooted purely in personal, or if I can say it, selfish reasons. I have a different motivation for being in this business at large. And so that's just the tip of the iceberg, probably a little more than you wanted, but
No,
there
that's
you go.
awesome.
Yeah, I think faith plays an important part with any entrepreneur. I mean, whether you are a person of faith or religious at all, entrepreneurship by definition requires faith, because you're always stepping out in faith. You're always doing something without having all the information, incomplete or no resources at all. And so I think it's critical. Again, whether you call it faith or not, the principle, I think, is exactly the same. You're just shining a light on it. But I think every entrepreneur would agree that it always takes belief and faith to be able to move forward as well. Speaking of faith and moving forward here, so we talked about how you found the deal and how you got support. It's great that you got support from your wife. And the other question that people are going to have is, Bernie, how in the world did you raise money for this deal? How did you make that happen?
Yes. Well, I started the way everyone else does, I think, or most people, just reaching out to friends and family. And at some level, it is a hard sell. To this day, I have family members, I think, that believe that I am in some kind of Ponzi scheme or uh,
Right?
some kind of multi-level marketing, and
It's
I'm just
called
kind of
the
flabbergasted.
syndicate. You're
That's right.
in the syndicate.
There's a mob aspect, right? A mob aspect. And so I'm just kind of flabbergasted. I'm like, I'm offering an opportunity to double your money. Yes, I get paid for that. I get compensated, but I just I don't get it. But anyway, I have, you always have a few people that really do just believe in you. And so there were actually three investors, two of them pastor friends, that said, we're in with you all the way. And they were in, and they put their money where their mouth was. One of them was 100 grand, one of them was 75, and one of them was 50. And so I had some big players right away, and then I threw in another 25 of my own. So if you count it, I raised $250,000 my first deal.
Nice.
It was a small start, but I partnered with some great guys that it helped me raise the rest of the capital, and so we closed that deal. And then my second deal.
Hold on, let's not gloss over the
Oh, okay,
partnerships. You
go ahead.
glossed over as you raise $250,000 yourself, and then you you partner with a couple of guys to raise the rest. Okay, talk about how did you find these guys? How did you partner? What did they do? And how did you all make it work? Let's finish the first deal first.
Okay. First, surprise, I found my partners through my mentor, Drew Whitson. And so
Nice.
he has all the contacts. He actually helped me try to find several partners. I interviewed with several different groups, and they basically said no, like they didn't want to work with me, which did not do very well for my confidence. But looking back, they just weren't at the right place. Everyone goes in cycles. One guy just didn't have money, didn't have the capital, and the other guy, his group, the underwriting requirements were just different than what my deal was. And so no harm, no foul. But my third or fourth attempt, Drew says, hey, I got a couple of guys that are kind of in your shoes, looking for their first deal, and I think they would be a great fit. And so I know them, know their personalities, I've worked with them. And so he got us all together on a Zoom call, and we basically just had kind of an interview or a meet and greet, and didn't see any red flags. And we were like, okay, by faith, let's work together and get this deal over the finish line. And I will say the guys are Steve Chan and Justin Elliott, and they've been phenomenal. I look forward to partnering with them again in the future. We don't have like an official business together, but I definitely want to partner with those guys. They bring a level of inspection, and they bring some gifts to the table that I don't have. I kind of move forward without thinking sometimes, and just like bull in a china shop, and they bring a lot of wisdom and sometimes rein me back in when I need to be reined in. So it's been a great partnership.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a very important thing. I would have been shocked if you had not joint ventured, because literally, I can't think of a single person that has not joint ventured in this business, and it's so powerful. First of all, yes, so you have access to deals, access to capital, but then you complement each other in different strengths, as you just pointed out as well, and that's why this business is so unbelievable, and it applies to so many different people's walks of life. So now you've done the law of the first deal, right? And did the law of the first deal kick in some way, or did it take a really long time to do a second deal?
It kicked in right away, but it took a long time. So both. It kicked in right away because all of a sudden I had in that market, or in that submarket, I had credibility, and so it totally worked. It took a long time for two reasons. One, as Drew says, I had deal fever, and so I had to have this deal, and I really forced it. But we got it done, and it took a long time, honestly, because the seller was a bear to work with, and
Mm.
I'll not give his name. I've actually forgotten his name subconsciously. I've put it out of my mind. But it took us. I worked on that deal from November of 2021 of 2020 until we closed in February of 2022.
Holy,
And
that was the first deal or the second deal?
second deal.
The second deal. All right, great. So the first deal was hard enough, And then, but November 2020 was almost right after your first deal, right? That you got on a contract.
Yeah, we closed in the height of COVID in August 2020, and we were off to the races. And then about November, December, I started getting this deal come across
Yeah.
my desk from
Yeah.
several sources, and it was just exploratory at first. And I can't remember the timeline, but we had the thing under contract. We came to the wire 2, 3, 4 times. I was calling the broker. I was sending emails. We're done. Due diligence is over. Send us our money back. And they're like, no, we can do this. We can do that. And it just stayed alive. And it stayed alive, but finally closed basically the 1st of February 22.
So what was the seller doing that made it so difficult, or what was going on?
He would say things that weren't true when we would inspect the property, and vacancy was not as expected. There was a significant amount of capex that was not disclosed. There were units that were condemned and were not livable according to the city. I forget what you call them, but they had code violations. That's what it was. They had code violations on them, active, and none of that was disclosed to us. And so it was just like one thing after another. And I have no clue if the guy just took his eye off the ball and was focused on other things, or if he was really just kind of not upfront with a lot of things. But who cares? I mean, you never know somebody's motivations, but all I know is what were the facts.
And your mentor was basically at one point, just walk away from me. You're like, no, I'm not. I'm not walking away from this.
I would ask Drew periodically things. I kind of left him alone for this second deal and really tried to step out on my own. But he always responds to my calls and texts, and he'll meet with me. Huge encouragement and a help. And so his mentorship continued even beyond official mentorship, if you will. And so, but yeah, he helped me walk through some hairy situations with that deal.
That's pretty cool. So you got how much money did you have to raise for that one?
That one we raised 1.5 million, and I raised about 750,000 of that.
And so how did you expand then your network? So you had a couple of pastor friends and you raised $250,000, put a little money in. Now you tripled it. Where did you go from there, and what kind of investors did you bring in from that point?
It's interesting you asked that question. I have a very atypical investor. I honestly cater to people that are just like me, to pastors and full-time ministry workers, even missionaries that are living in foreign fields, or for just the common man. It's very typical for people to raise money from high net worth individuals and really target them. I have nothing against that. I just chose to basically go the opposite route and say, I'm going to go to the poor man. And I'm just going to trust God to bring the right investors to me. And so I have 3 or 4 investors on this deal that are at $5,000, which is a ridiculously low investment. But my heart is that they would see the value of real estate investment, and in particular, multifamily syndication. And I think that I'm going to get back from those relationships through referrals and things like that. And that's what I saw in this deal. I had 2 pastor friends in my first deal. I had 15 pastor friends or their immediate family members that invested in my second deal. So word had already started to spread, or just organically, word of mouth. My champions already were out there working for me. And that's how I was able to bring that together.
What is like your main message for these people when you go out and talk to them about what you're doing?
My big message, honestly, is I call it, well, it's called stewardship. That's a common word. People understand that. But really, it's being a steward or a caretaker of the resources that you have. And again, rooting back to my faith, Jesus said, he that is faithful in little, he'll be faithful also in much, or he that has been given little and is faithful, I will also give him much. And not a direct quote there, don't quote me. But the concept being that we need to use every resource that we have, time, energy, money, relationships, for the greater good. And I would say that is for the cause of Christ and for the glory of God. And so all my pastor friends or their family members, I say, what are you doing with your money? Like, you live in America. You live in the greatest nation on earth. You have access to incredible amounts of capital and deals, why would you spend your money away, or why would you not be invested and get greater returns and therefore increase your influence and your ability to do good in the world? And
Yeah.
so I really just appeal to their sense of stewardship and the responsibility that they have before God to use their resources well.
Yeah, exactly right. Nothing better than multifamily. So that's awesome. So how many units do you have now, and how much money have you and your partners raised now to date? We'll skip over the next few deals.
Okay. I actually only have the 2 deals, hunting for my third. But we have 105 units total, and raised basically about $1 million. So
That's
where I'm
fantastic.
at.
That is fantastic. So what's your number? What's your advice to anyone listening to this? Going, okay, man, I back where you were in 2019, maybe I got a rental house or two, or maybe not. What is your advice to someone who wants to do what you've done? Do your first deal, do a second deal, covers your living expenses, and now you're set up for the future. What's your advice to them?
My advice would just be to commit and to keep moving forward every day. Again, they're just cliches. I hate that, but it is so true. If you're not all in and willing to put it all on the line, in a sense, you're not. I can't guarantee success in many ways. Like, you have to be willing to say, I'm in this to the end, and then go for it. And then you have to be consistent. You can't be sporadic. There have been ups and downs in my consistency throughout the years, but by and large, I probably spend 10 to 15 hours a week on my real estate business, and recently more focused on business development and lead generation. But I do that consistently, and then you end up seeing consistent results. And it's a principle of life. Everybody knows it. Just apply it to the gym. If you do 1 3-hour workout a week, it really doesn't have nearly the benefit as you doing 4 45-minute workouts a week. Like, it's just way better for you to do things consistently and in smaller batches, I guess, than one huge monster day.
I talk about consistency all the time. I think that's literally one of the number one secret to being successful in anything in life. Are there any particular hacks that you use, especially in the beginning, as you were trying to pivot from whatever you're doing and making room for real estate investing? Is there any disciplines or practices that you use to start building up that consistency and that momentum?
For the first deal, no, it was just all in. And so honestly, I put in way more than that many hours each week. And my wife understood. I mean, it was just, we got to do what we got to do, up early, staying up late, fitting it in every chance I get. I basically didn't have days off. My days off were devoted to real estate. And so it was just like, go, go, go for that first deal. When I acquired the second one, I kind of hit that wall that everyone hits, I guess, where they realize, okay, I have to manage multiple properties here and multiple assets, and how do I divide my time? And then I became really a disciple of putting it on my calendar, and I started living by my Google Calendar and saying, well, here's this block of time I have to do this. Here's this block of time I have to do this. And if it didn't fit in that block of time, then I basically didn't do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to fulfill my other responsibilities as a husband, father, pastor, or anything. And so nothing too deep, but that's basically it. I just hard charged until the first deal, and then learned really the importance of scheduling and blocking my time.
Burnie, it's been really fantastic hearing your perspective on the business from kind of the field that you've been in. I mean, it's just amazing to hear all of this. How can people reach you?
They can reach me. The best way is through calling or texting me. I'll answer directly, 619-971-1279. Or if you want to, you can email me at Burnie@forgeequitygroup.com. And it's it's Burnie.
Burnie. Yeah. Better hire a VA because your phone's going to ring. Burnie, it's been really great to have you on the show.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure being here. I'm so thankful you guys invited me.